New Thought Media Network is excited to present Divine Science Everywhere, Fridays at 2 p.m. Mountain Time and 4 p.m. Eastern. Come explore a modern experience of divine science. With Reverend Joy Fletcher, Reverend Jeff Radcliff, and Bishop Durrell Watkins. Join us as we open our eyes to divine science everywhere we look. Fridays on New Thought Media Network.
Welcome to Divine Science Everywhere. We're so glad that you could join us today. I'm Reverend Joy Fletcher, and I'm president of the Divine Science Ministers Association and co-host of Divine Science Everywhere.
And hi, I'm Reverend Jeff, and glad to be here with you. I'm also one of your co-hosts, and I get to introduce our esteemed guest today. We'll do that later on. You can find me on Facebook at Giati Ministries, and that's Giati, God is all there is. And of course, being divine science, we know that God is all there is. New Thought teaches that as well, but we tend to emphasize the omnipresence of spirit. I'm happy to do that. I don't see our bishop anywhere around.
Well, then I'd like to say a few things. Today is the last day that I'm serving as a hospice bereavement coordinator. So I'm saying farewell to my 19th year of hospice experience. And I'm so excited to step into this next chapter of my life, because life is ever unfolding, and we all have different experiences, and it's all part of the whole. So I'm excited about that, and truthful, I'm more excited than anything. And I've had some tearful moments this week because, you know, as we say farewell to things, sometimes there's a bit of sadness and grief, and it's okay to acknowledge that. And as we acknowledge it and face it, and then we're more open to receive whatever comes to us on our path.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Well, I don't know where Bishop Durrell is, but that's all right. We're going to just move ahead. He can join us later. One of his highlights, and he's going to miss the beginning of it at least, is our centering moment. Reverend Joy gives a hell of of a centering moment. So let's get started with that, shall we, Reverend Joy?
Yes, or heavenly.
There you go. There you. Oh, you're not going to miss it after all. All right. Well, go ahead and do your introduction then before we get started.
Hey, I'm Durrell. Hi, everybody.
See, this is just perfect because life has its different expressions. And, you know, sometimes we as human beings think that things are going to move and operate a certain way. And the important thing is to learn to be flexible and be open and receptive to how the divine unfolds.
I
And
thought you were going to say the important thing is to be punctual, but okay. No, I like it the way you said it better. That's good.
we are here on right and divine time. So let us in this moment arrive in this moment together. And we allow our bodies to settle, our breath to soften. Let your shoulders release. Let your jaws relax. And let us set aside any busyness, any so-called disruption that occurred before this moment. For right now is a new beginning a new moment. We don't have anywhere to go in this moment. We just are present in the omnipresence, which is perfect good. Perfect good. There's nothing to solve, nothing to fix. Just be here now. So today, I'd like to begin with a reading, today's reading, in fact, from Around the Year with Emmett Fox, who was a divine science minister. And today is 44, and I like numbers, and 44, double. And this reading begins, the forgiveness of sins is the central problem of life. Sin is a sense of separation from God and is the major tragedy of human experience. It is, of course, rooted in selfishness. It's essentially an attempt to attain some supposed good to which we are not entitled to in justice. It is a sense of isolated, self-regarding personal existence, whereas the truth of being is all that is one. Our true selves are with the great whole of which we are a spiritually part. It follows that we are one with all men. Evil, sin, the fall of man, in fact, is essentially the attempt to negate this truth. We try to live apart from God. We act as though we have plans and purposes and interests separate from Him. All this, if it were true, would mean that existence is not one and harmonious, but a chaos of competition and strife. But of course, it is not true, and therein lies the joy of life. So think about these words written, spoken many years ago, and are as ever true in our current affairs as they were then. As we recognize that our oneness with one another, we recognize that the true answer, the true expression is to focus on that oneness, the allness, the goodness of the presence of divine love. A new thought, understanding, forgiveness is not pardoning wrongdoing, it's awakening from the illusion of separation. It's remembering that nothing real has ever been outside divine presence. What we call error, fear, or sin is simply forgetfulness, the temporary belief that we are alone, disconnected, or in competition with life itself. And yet the truth of unconditional love remains always. When we feel separate, we suffer. When we remember our oneness, peace is felt, experienced, and expressed. So the idea of forgiveness becomes a release, not of others, but of ourselves, from the burden of believing we were ever separate to begin with. And then, as we recognize that we are never separate from this being, we recognize that this is true about others and for others. So in this moment, allow yourself to gently release any illusion of division, of separateness. The sense of yours and mine and us against them, but instead focus on our oneness, on our unity, our at one-ment with one another, our source, our creator, with love. This is the truth. This is the truth. Capital T, truth. Principle. Life is omnipresent. Love is omnipresent. Peace is omnipresent. This is where wholeness is experienced. We do not create peace, but instead we remember it. For everyone has this divine blueprint within themselves of peace, of love, of wholeness, of unity, of allness. The omnipresence. The omnipresence. We do not create love. It is within ourselves. It is our very nature. It is your very nature. It is our very nature. There is no separation to heal. Instead, only to remember the truth of omnipresence, which is absolute good, which is perfect love, perfect life, and perfect substance. As we recognize this, affirm this, practice and breathe into this, we see things as they are meant to be: harmonious, peaceful. So all of us are here on this planet for the purpose of expressing the divine love as the divine beings we are. Some of us forget that and think we need to focus more on human will and strength instead of leaning back in the everlasting arms of love, of omnipresence, of peace. And as we do this, we trust in the source and know that everyone is provided for. No need for strife, just trust. No need to attempt to manipulate, but rather allow ourselves to feel and express and to be the divine love that we are, the divine essence. As we live and move and have our being in this divine love. So right now, in this moment, and going forward, know that this love, this omnipresent, this divine science is in all, through all, and as all, and shall be forevermore And so it is.
Thank you, Reverend Joy. Before we get to our guest and some business with New Thought Media Network, I want to celebrate today, Friday the 13th. How fun is that? But it's also February 13th, 2026. And if you do your little numerology game, that comes up to 7, and which of course is completion, it's consciousness, it's awareness, it's intuition, it's all good stuff. So hooray for this particular Friday the 13th. F. Bernadette Turner was a divine science minister. She was also a social worker and a psychologist at the end of her life. She was an Episcopal priest. She was a yoga teacher. She used so many great things. And she used a lot. She loved numbers also. And so she was using, she would include numeric formulas in her treatments. And so that's just a little fun side note. Speaking of historical folk like F. Bernadette Turner, let me tell you about a little guy called Saint Valentine. He died in 269. Yep, still triple digits. 2069 or 269. And of course, St. Valentine has long been removed from the list of official saints in the Roman Catholic Church. Valentine's Day has been taken over by the greeting card industry and become fixed to the popular calendar of most people. It seems to have its origins in England, where it was noted that birds began to pair and mate around the feast of St. Valentine. The original Valentine was likely a Christian priest in Rome who was beheaded for refusing to renounce his faith. He gave his heart to God, his divine lover. And that's why hearts and pairing and all that stuff is associated with Valentine's Day. I also want to tell you about Elizabeth Cyril Lamb. She was born in 1917. She died in 2005, not super long ago. She was an American poet and a key figure in the development of haiku in the West. She often referred to as the first lady of American haiku, and her work emphasized capturing moments of profound simplicity and natural observation. Through her writing, editing, and tireless advocacy, Elizabeth Cyril Lamb significantly contributed to the recognition and appreciation of haiku as a serious literary form, leaving an impact on the genre. Lamb wrote several spiritual articles for Divine Science publications. And finally, I just want to mention Giordano Bruno. He was around in the 1500s, died in 1600. And Bruno taught that God is everywhere immanent, omnipresent, you might say. God is everywhere immanent throughout the universe. Bruno was an Italian poet and philosopher who wrote, "God is the principle of unity in all activity and is the principle of oneness." This 16th century Italian poet and philosopher knew, as we know, that God is the principle of unity and the principle of oneness, and that this principle is omnipresent, everywhere fully present throughout the universe. He referred to God as divine mind, and he held that mind and matter are one. So he was around before Ms. Kramer and the Brooks sisters got to doing their thing, but he was teaching what they taught, at least in some measure, way before they got here. Because truth is one, and truth is true, and we keep finding ways to dress it up and market it, but it's just always what it is. So those are the people that I have for today to share with you, and we've got another person that's very current, very contemporary, that we will be hearing from in a bit. But first, I need to remind you that we are Divine Science Everywhere, and this is the New Thought Media Network.
welcome back to New Thought Media Network and Divine Science Everywhere. I am pleased to present our guest today, Reverend Kurt Condra is senior minister at Unity on the North Shore in Evanston, Indiana. He presents classes and workshops on spiritual abundance, speaking authentically, and healing relationships. He's written for Unity Magazine, Daily Word, and for the Unity devotionals for Lent and Advent. Before ministry, Kurt worked 20 years in the publishing industry, first for the Los Angeles Times and the San Francisco Chronicle in their new media divisions, and then becoming editor and later managing editor for Newport Communications, which is an award-winning trade magazine publisher. Welcome, Reverend Kurt. How are you today?
Thank you. Very happy to be here, although a little humbled to be the contemporary to St. Valentine. Oh, and I do have one small correction. Evanston, Illinois. There's also an Evanston, Indiana, but we're in Illinois. So
I must have misread that. My apologies. Well, wherever you are, we're glad to have you with us today. What brought you to New Thought in the first place?
Oh, my goodness. I was raised in a very small town in the Midwest, just over the Indiana border. And the town was so small that there weren't enough parishioners for both a Baptist and a Presbyterian church. So they all gathered together in a place called Union Church. And that's kind of the environment I grew up in. I didn't really understand the distinction between Baptist or Presbyterian. My grandmother played organ at the Methodist church, so it all just kind of got tumbled together. And then after high school, we were very active in church life growing up. And then after high school, I think like a lot of us, college years just kind of fell away. I wasn't really involved in any kind of spiritual tradition. And I went on, I came out as gay in the course of that time. And so then most churches didn't feel safe at all. And I finally, created a life for myself that I thought I was pretty happy with, nice career with the publishing company that you mentioned, and all the stuff I thought I wanted, had a partner and new cars and a nice house and vacations, but something was still missing for me. And so I went searching for a spiritual teaching that I could relate to. And we happened to live, this was in Long Beach, California years ago, and we happened to live very near, and it was in the days when the AIDS epidemic was just kind of getting near its end. So there was a church that was run by a very evangelical minister who was a former drag queen. So he was the minister, it was very flamboyant, very active, high energy, and there were a lot of black women who were amazing in the choir. So it was just this really cool place to kind of land and feel safe with who I was, but the theology never quite matched. The devil get thee behind me was still a part of that theology, and it wasn't quite a fit. It was a wonderful place to kind of land and feel a sense of healing. But my partner and I attended one of those services, and he freaked out. And we went back home, and later that night we could finally talk about it. And he dragged down this box from the attic of these very fundamentalist coloring books that he had worked with his grandmother as a child on. And that sort of set him off on a path back to fundamentalism. And so he went to one of those Heal the Gay churches, and he tried to get me engaged in that. And eventually I couldn't hang. We split up. And it was after that that I ended up sort of being introduced to, I was dating a guy. This was visiting Atlanta. I've been all over the place since I started this story, haven't I? Dating a guy in Atlanta, and I ended up sort of you know how the Thanksgiving tables are huge and all families are there? And I ended up sort of trapped in a corner next to his father on one side and me on the other. And his father was a former Baptist preacher who had found unity. So he had all that evangelistic energy and was like, you have to come to church with me. You have to be at church Sunday. And that's when I ended up at Unity Church of Atlanta on the Sunday after Thanksgiving. And I eventually went back to home and listened to a tape with the basic spiritual principles for weeks. And eventually finally looked up a Unity Church in California in my home. and started attending there. Even then, I sat on the back row for many, many weeks, listening for any hint that they didn't practice what they preached, and never heard that. And finally, I ended up getting involved in the teachings and in the classes and in the teachings. And there was a licensed Unity teacher. Her name was Barbara Bowling, and she saw in me something I didn't see, never saw coming. And so she would only teach classes that she knew would be that it would be requirements for me to apply for eventually ordination. And she kept telling me, you got to just pay for the credits. You don't know what's going to come up. And eventually she had prepared me to really enter ministerial school. So I describe my path to New Thought as walking through the doors that opened. And I know a lot of people feel that calling from very early on in their life. For me, it was sort of, well, God, if that's the next thing, I'm open and I'll walk through that door. So that's kind of how I arrived. Eventually, I was ordained at I noticed I didn't put Reverend in my name, but I am a minister ordained by Unity in 2004. So going on, I guess that's 22 years in ministry now.
Okay. And this came after you were in the publishing industry, correct?
Yeah, which in a lot of ways, I think prepared me well for ministry. The capacity to write and work with editors and designers and, know sort of what questions to ask in developing stories. All that's great work for ministry, learning to listen well to the folks that we're serving and being present and aware and awake and always asking questions. And I still feel like that's my job. Like I'm asking, how is it that these teachings apply for us today? How do we make that relevant? How do we make that applicable for people in their lives? So I think journalism really prepared me well for ministry.
Okay, and the publishing was basically with journalism and newspapers, magazines, things of that nature, rather than books.
No books. In fact, this was pre-internet. Like, this was not possible back in those days. I worked for a company for the LA Times that sold subscriptions, and you had to have an AOL account, and you would have the subscription, and you would dial up, the Bebrew, all those, and you would log on to what they called gateway. You'd log on to a gateway, and it had a very, very simple, basic, not even graphic. You couldn't do live video, but I worked in the marketing department developing apps. We didn't call them that then, but apps they were games designed to get people to explore all the content that we had in other ways. So there'd be a little treasure, their little graphic of a pot of gold would show up in the corner. You'd click on that and you go off somewhere else on the internet, it wasn't internet then, I guess, but anyway, new media development. And that eventually turned into, then I moved to the San Francisco Chronicle. They were doing a similar thing, but public access at that point. If you ever rode the BART trains, and this would have been back in the early 80s, you would notice these terminals where you could print out little coupons and go to a restaurant near that terminal. And so, yeah, media way before, but how to engage people. It all serves, it all fits. I think Spirit prepares us well with the experience that we bring into ministry. And we all have different ways of doing that.
Awesome.
Yes, and then the idea of that seems to be the theme today, trusting whatever is set before us, and that leads to something else and something else. And I'll segue into how we met. And we were at a conference at Unity Village, and I was seated there, and Reverend Kurt came and sat next to me, and he said, "Is it time for lunch yet?" And it kind of almost, I started to just gradually chat, and then one thing led to the next, and we discovered we had some things in common, California connections and other things, and Unity background, and it led to we discussed that you would like to be a guest here, or I invited you to be a guest on the show. But I just chuckled to myself how just something that just happened. I mean, you recognize that you thought I would. Yeah, in fact, you said, "Oh, I thought you were someone else," and yet divine order had another plan. So I love that. I love that. And I totally agree how everything is it kind of stacks on each experience stacks on the other, and we learn and we develop, and it prepares us for the next thing and the next thing. And so I just remember over and over and over that none of this is what we might call a waste of time or doesn't seem to fit, but it does. It does. Everything has its own little key or energy to what we're doing.
Yeah.
So what do you think is the most significant or the most meaningful principle or teaching and new thought that has helped you the most?
Oh my gosh, to narrow it down to one. I'm, you know what? I have a really shorthand way of talking about Unity's 5 basic principles. God is, right, the oneness, the omnipotence that you've talked about, that you invoked for us as we opened today. I am, that same presence is a part of who I am and the beingness I am. I think, I have to be careful about the thoughts that I'm holding, because those are generative. They create in the world. I pray. That's how I align with that divinity, align with that spirity, whatever that conscious connection is, whatever wrestling might need to happen to be able to reach that. And I act, or I do. I kind of use those in tandem. And that God is, I am, I think, I pray, I do has become almost a mantra for me. So I'm cheating. That I totally should narrow it down to one. But that encapsulation it changed my life. I would not be here if it were not for really moving through the evolution of sort of my own spiritual understanding to those points. And it still serves well. It still serves very well.
Thank you. I love that. I love that.
The first New Thought church I ever went to was a Unity church. I was in college, and I worked next door to the church, and I love going to church, but I worked on Sundays. And so the only way I could go to church is to go to that one right next door. I could zip out right at the end and be at work on time. And so instead of Catholic or Episcopal churches that I were used to, I started going to this Unity church. And that started everything. So, and of course, then I discovered in those days, religious science, and then divine science, and that's where I landed. But Unity was my gateway drug. And that was true, I think, for Joy, too. So I wonder how many people know where they land got sort of drawn in by Unity. It's a very... the communication of Unity is so available. It's it's not over your head. It doesn't try to make it sound too smart. I remember the Word, these little commercials in the 70s on TV, and like famous actors would be there, and they'd just this little devotional or whatever, and they would show the gardens at Unity Village or whatever. And I just grew up on that, and I didn't know it was Unity, but I was being fed Unity already and didn't even know it. And so I just wonder how many people owe their New Thought journey in some way to Unity. That's kind of amazing to me.
Yes.
Well, I'm really excited. I don't know if viewers know, but Unity has been through its own evolution and transformation, and has for many years been run by 2 organizations that have now combined. And so I was really happy to see in our daily word, that daily devotional, now there's a little note at the bottom that you can find a Unity church. So that linkage that you're talking about, I think the more we can make not just Unity, New Thought in general, more accessible, more obvious, I think the more these teachings will be disseminated. Can I ask you something about, because I also, and as part of my journey to ministry, while I was at a Unity church still, I took a job as an administrator in an Episcopal church. So the whole liturgical piece of it, I developed a really wonderful appreciation, especially for the ritual part of that. And I'm just wondering, as you made that transition before, have you carried any of that with you still?
A lot of it.
Yes.
The church that I serve now, we're Eucharistic. It's not the same theology as before. I mean, it's very different theology. The common table, the cup we share, the bread we share, these are all symbols of unity, of our oneness.
And you do it every week in service? You do that
every Sunday, yep. We wear vestments. We sing songs that and of course Unity had done this in their hymnal too. We sing songs that the tunes you will know, but the words are different because the words are all very affirming and unifying and all that. So no sin, any of that. So yeah, we've kept the form, but we've new thought. I mean, my doctorate degree is from the Episcopal Divinity School, and I was confirmed Episcopalian, and so all of that is still with me. My predecessor was also New Thought, but also a Roman Catholic. I mean, an old Catholic priest, and he incarnated me into that business. So we're this sort of unique combination of New Thought principles, but liturgical performance, and then the music is varied. I mean, so you'll hear something from Handel, and something from country and western, and something from show tunes, all in the same service. Because as long as the message is about love and unity, that's what we get. And so we don't care who's singing it or what tradition. And then we also, in our lectionary, we have a cycle of readings. And so there's always a biblical reading, but there's also readings from Ernest Holmes, from Melinda Kramer, from Annie Rex Millets, from the Dhammapada, from the Tao Te Ching. So it's a mixture of all that. And I think that's because of where, I came from.
So is the lectionary, is this too many? Am I going too deeply into this? It's not exactly New Thought. But what I love about it is that it really demonstrates that the teachings are universal,
Yeah.
Where I live in Evanston, right outside Chicago. So all the stuff with ice that went down earlier in the year, the Christian churches, mainstream Christian churches in town are really progressive here. And so they end up being way more on the front lines of social activism than the New Thought churches for most of us. I know we have a few folks who are really out there, but I end up being a little bit envious of that. And I also know that the part that we bring to it about standing for and not against, that's also a really important component. But what I love is that it all works together. I mean, sort of like the spiritual pieces, regardless of which perspective you're coming from, as we ground ourselves in those teachings that are based on love and unity and oneness, regardless of what the denomination is, there's just a wonderful power that seems to be emerging that's not limited to any one of our specific spokes into the wheel.
Yeah. I think that was one of the lessons we learned from AIDS, is that when we had monotherapies, you'd get relief for a year or two, and then you'd become immune to the therapy, and then you'd be sick again or whatever. It wasn't until we had combination therapies that we were able to get people with HIV to have long lives, healthy lives, manageable, just like any other illness almost. So that combination therapies is what turned it around. And when we combine, when we complement, when we work together, that's when we turn things around. So I think that's one of the lessons of a very difficult time. But it did show that when you accept different ways of coming at it and you do it all together, that's when the miracle happens. You said you had this that your minister sort of tailored the program to you to get you there. Like she saw your path almost before you did, maybe. Is that how you mentor students now? Do you do what she did for you?
I hadn't thought of that. No, well, the program's changed so much now. It used to be that, your home church is where you would get the requirement classes. And now most of that, I teach a few classes, but I'm not nearly as engaged in it. I do tend to really notice who's diving in, who's applying, whose lives are being changed, and encourage them along that way and encourage them into different modes of leadership. But not quite well, I guess I am as surreptitious as Barbara was. Because if she'd have told me early on that's what she was aiming for, I would have freaked out. But she walked me through it, and over the course of about 3 years, I ended up having she was like, well, if you go up to Walnut Creek and do one of these week-long intensives, you could do this. So I went to Walnut Creek. Not that I was going to do the next thing, but Walnut Creek was a manageable next step. And it was the same way. Even once I applied, I'd never been to Unity Village. Most folks who go into the path at that point had all been to Unity Village and a lot of the classes they'd taken there. I showed up there for the first time for interviews to be admitted into ministerial school. So it was a kind of a different path. I don't remember how that relates to the question you had asked, but
just mentoring. And yeah, obviously you do a lot of hands-on mentoring, even though the system has changed.
yeah. Oh, I think it's about leaders. Now it's more about sort of nurturing folks into leadership, into their own personal growth and development. And then, just letting them know what's available in terms of taking other of the, most of the classes that I teach are more around, the more contemporary books. And then the classics are taught online, usually by the folks that are now authorized to teach credentialed classes. Not that I wouldn't have that as a minister as a possibility, but there's plenty to do in my own ministry without. And so I encourage them to just look at what resources are available. And I would say that's the most rewarding part of ministry, actually, is seeing how people that I am in service to, how they take hold of these ideas and begin to apply them to their own lives and start to see really significant changes. And they might start gradually, but it really is transformative. These teachings that we use help people, equip people, I think, to really be brave, to really, go up against the parts that might feel uncomfortable and have the courage to step through that to a deeper level of understanding and a deeper expression of the love and who they truly are. That when you start to see that unfolding, that's exciting. That's
It
really
is. It is. It is.
Did your
I remember, pardon me?
I'm sorry, Joy, go ahead.
Well, I remember too the pre-internet days of correspondence courses in between in-person courses at Unity Village and things like that. So it's just different things have transformed. Jeff, did you have to do correspondence courses when you were studying for the ministry?
I was originally ordained through International Metaphysical Ministries, and it was all correspondence.
Yes.
Yeah, and then later on, when I studied with Reverend Dr. Tim Stewart for Divine Science, wasn't technically correspondence, but I did have to write some stuff and send in to him, so I guess that kind of sort of counts, maybe.
In the Anglican tradition, we call that reading for orders.
Reading for
We did reading for orders, yeah.
Oh, interesting.
and funny. Now it's a combination of all that, right? They have assignments that get posted, and there's comments back and forth, and then you meet on person. It's like we've congealed all of it.
Yes.
You have to meet the needs, and the needs change. And speaking of, how did your ministry change after COVID?
Oh, we're kind of a wild story. So literally, the week before COVID, we had Charlene Manuel, who I know has been a guest on this show. She was in to do some training with our boards about being in one accord and how you deal with change. And what she was really there to help us discern was how to move through the sale of our property and, how to prepare the congregation and leadership to be able to do that well. And then COVID, the next week was the shutdown. Mm-hmm. So all of our emphasis on what are we going to do about moving to a building stopped. And it was what do we do about just staying connected? And like all of us, there's now an online component that wasn't there before. We're very blessed to have some really passionate tech folks who run all of the AV stuff for us and have continued to even since COVID. So we do a hybrid ministry, hybrid Sunday service. And then most of our board meetings and most classes end up being on Zoom. Our congregation, like many, is toward the older end of the spectrum. So driving at night is a thing, and it's just way more accessible. We do a lot more online than we ever did. The piece, though, that now that I'm really, we are, I don't want to say me, it's all of us, are working to do is like, I think one of the needs that we have culturally and societally is for belonging and connection, that there's so much isolation that happens. Yeah. And so we're really focusing in on how is it that we can be together in ways that are about nurturing relationship. And it's changed. We're just talking this week, like even down to when you have a new person come in through the front doors, there's this focus we've had for a while. We want to grow. And I was on a call this week where it was like, yeah. And the energy kind of behind that is when I meet you, when I greet you, what do I have to say to get you to come back next week? You know, there's like this real, how do we fill seats kind of energy. And this week I heard a comment that it's really about what if the question changes from how do we grow? How do we get you in the door? How do we get you to become a part of this? To really curiosity about how it is that we can cultivate relationship. Like then the question changes immediately, and it's really looking for ways in which we can be curious about one another, and recognizing that this is even though it's a brand new relationship, it's a relationship. And so what kinds of questions would be appropriate in a brand new relationship? And that's different than, well, how did you find us? So I think right now, my focus is really on how do we keep that sense of belonging, especially because, and the move is still on, but we've been through a whole lot of legal red tape and city planning stuff to be able to get the sale of our building approved. And in fact, next month, it's looking like we're finally going to be before City Council. Evanston has very strict development guidelines, and our buyer, who has stuck with us through these whole 5 years, has redesigned the plan a number of times. And I know that when a church community moves, generally there are folks who, for whatever reason, it's not close enough or it's a different spot, there's a shift in attendance. And so we're focusing on how do we really increase the sense of belonging here, and how do we also stay open to welcoming new folks in.
I like that. I like that a lot.
That's from...
I took notes. Yeah, that's good.
Well, it's really shifted us from a focus on we are this building, and there's still a lot of attachment to the building. I know we're going to have some grieving process that'll have to happen when the doors actually close. And we've shifted from we are a building to we are the church. And so how are we supporting and serving and belonging with one another? And I think we've had more time than most people do, most churches, when they make this kind of a decision because of all the legal stuff, more time to cultivate that. And so I feel like the folks that have stuck through it are really well bonded and really have a deep understanding and appreciation for the fact that it's, Jesus never had a building. He was moving around all the time. And that it's about how we are and not this place that we are.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the fact that you continue to do online as well, considering that a lot of churches have gone back to strictly in-person services, and that kind of does sort of alienate those who are able to get out or for whatever reason attend at whatever time. And I myself personally, for a variety of reasons, don't travel, so the majority of speaking that I do in different churches is via Zoom. So I appreciate that as well.
Yeah, it's been a discussion among leadership whether or not, we want to encourage people to be here. So why are we giving them this other alternative? The folks who Zoom in with us, we have about half in person and half online. So we're a small community, 30 each way.
I think that's excellent, though, because if it's about what's in the room, you're limited to how many seats you have in the room. The internet, you have no limitations, and somebody in Alaska can benefit from your ministry, where they couldn't do that if it was just in the room. We reached so far throughout COVID, and now 2 of our top 5-7 givers, 2 of them are from our global fellowship. That's what we call it. And of those 2, 1 has never set foot on the property. 2 of our biggest givers don't live in the state, but that wouldn't happen without the online component. So my struggle is to get the consciousness of this is a good thing, and not be sad that there's not as many full seats as there were before, because there's way more people than there ever were before, but I can't see them. But that's a me thing, and that's an ego thing, and I got to get over that.
Mm-hmm.
The good
and
thing
I
is,
think of all the years when I worked at, hospice chaplain, there's so many people that felt disenfranchised because they were shut-ins and they couldn't attend church. And that was before the virtual options. And so they had to rely on somebody from the church to come and see them every once in a while. And sometimes ministers, especially small churches or a large church, and
Rural churches.
minister are really stretched and they can't give those shut-ins, those individuals, the attention that they need. So
and even with television church, you couldn't engage. You could watch, but you couldn't ask questions or make comments or give online and before you could record or whatever, if you missed that 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 11 o'clock, whatever broadcast, you just missed it.
Yes.
And none of that's an issue with internet.
Yes. So
Well, this is me. I've got to be the time police, and everyone gets mad at me for it. But we only have 4 minutes left, and we can squeeze a lot into 3 or 4 minutes. But before we do any of that, we've got to have one more break, and to remind you that this is Divine Science Everywhere on New Thought Media Network.
Come expand your spiritual journey. Join us for Just the Talk, Sundays, 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Experience Unity Kitchener and Ottawa. Center for Spiritual Living Midtown. Center for Spiritual Living Denver. Unity of Garden Park. New Thought Philadelphia. The Sunshine Cathedral. Unity of Savannah. And the Om Center for Spiritual Living. Come unleash your spiritual potential with New Thought Media Network.
If you want to see that New Thought liturgy situation, the Sunshine Cathedral, that's us.
I just wrote that down. I'm like, Sunshine Cathedral. Okay, yeah, I do.
And you're on YouTube too, aren't you, Durrell?
YouTube, Facebook, and New Thought Media Network. Yep.
Yes.
We're new to this one, only a few weeks. But yeah, we've been on YouTube and Facebook for years.
Mm-hmm.
I am definitely going to check that out.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And I really appreciate that you came and asked about lunch.
I love a man who's got his priorities straight.
Yes, no deep theological discussion there. Let's just eat.
And next week, our guest is Reverend Eamon Duffy, and we're really looking forward to that. And the following week, the two co-hosts and myself are discussing divine science principles. And then we also have great speakers the entire month of March and April booked. So stay tuned. Lots of great things coming. Yes, we're doing great. We're approaching our 1-year anniversary. So.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
We started on Good Friday last year.
That's right. Which happened to be my eldest son's birthday. And then the opening music was written by my youngest son. So
Nice.
It's good vibes. So until next week, in fact, you can watch this broadcast and previous broadcasts on YouTube, and it's Divine Science Everywhere. And remember that divine science is in all, through all, and as all, as well as New Thought Media Network. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Amen. Thank you.